one, and I'm not here to argue whether or not, you know, it is this great example of, you know, an excellent modern, or not even modern. Hi, my bookish friends. It is Courtney, and welcome back to the Biblio Style. If you are new here, thanks for stopping by, and for returning subscribers, it's great to hang out with you guys once again. So today we are doing the Finally Fall book tag because it's finally fall, and yeah, I live in Ohio, and the weather is finally starting to cool off a little bit. I think we're finally like in the 60s, which is like my sweet spot for fall temperatures. It's cool enough to wear sweaters, but still warm enough that I can wear boots with bare legs or pants with no socks and flats. So that's like my perfect fall weather time, and that like 1 week in the fall where the temperatures are perfect and my allergies aren't trying to kill me, like that's my jam. So anyway, let's dive in. So the first question is, and if you see me looking down, I have notes in my traveler's notebook. So the first question is, in the fall, the air is crisp. Name a book with a vivid setting. So my pick for this is Mexican Gothic by, I can't remember the author. I think it's Sylvia Moreno Garcia, or it might be Garcia Moreno. I am so sorry. I can't look it up because I'm filming on my phone, and I did not look it up before I started filming, but I will put it somewhere on the screen. So this book is, it wasn't really like horror to me. It was more like a gothic thriller, but it takes place in the 1950s in Mexico. The main character, Noemi, goes, she is like a debutante in Mexico City, and she is dispatched to check on her cousin Catalina, who the year prior married a man of somewhat dubious background, and has been living in his family's estate. I believe it's called High Point, and it's like deeper in a more agricultural area of Mexico. And she lives there with her husband, his very old, very creepy grandfather, her husband's sister, and his nephew. So she gets there, and there's this really, I think the author does a really good job of giving the atmosphere, this air of, is this really happening or isn't it? Like, is she kind of hallucinating all of these creepy, very sinister things that are happening, or are they really happening? So it's like that kind of psychological thriller kind of situation. And the house and the grounds of this estate almost function as another character in the story. The author does a very good job of really making this house come alive. There's lots of talk of this almost sort of like rotting, decaying kind of wealth that gives me like big Miss Havisham vibes. And the wallpaper is peeling, and the paint is chipping, and there's talk of mold and dust. And really, as someone who suffers a lot from allergies, specifically allergies to dust and allergies to mold, and sort of you know, basically the environment tries to kill me, it felt very suffocating to me, almost to the point where I was like, do I need to get my inhaler? Like, am I actually having an asthma attack, or is that the book? So I think it did a very good job with that, and I think it's also like a perfect kind of fall creepy read. Um, the next question is, nature is beautiful but also dying. Name a book that is beautifully written but deals with a heavy topic. So my pick for this question is Real Life by Brandon Taylor. I read it, I think, in June. And this book is so beautifully written. It's one of those books where, like, I don't know if you were like a bookish kid and sort of read a lot and journaled a lot and wrote a lot and had this notion that you would grow up and be a writer, and then you read a book like this and it's sort of um, like cuts through all of the bullshit, because there is no way that you could craft sentences that beautiful, like, ever. So it is, the language in the book is beautiful. It is also like sparse in a way that doesn't feel bare. I almost want to compare it to, like, if you've ever watched Top Chef, when they do the challenges that are like very simple, like prepare like the perfect egg, or the perfect, like, or make pasta from scratch. And it's those, almost, not that I've ever made pasta from scratch, but it's those types of challenges that really lay bare the technique that you need to have to make something so simple incredible. And I think Brandon Taylor does an amazing job of that in this novel. So the story is, the main character of the book is Wallace, and he is a black gay graduate student at a predominantly white university in the Midwest. The book really takes place over the course of a weekend, and it's a fall weekend. I almost want to say it's a holiday weekend. I can't really remember, but it is a weekend. And we see him struggle with feeling like he belongs, and that for many of us who have been the only black person or person of color, or one of very few, people who look like us, that otherness can be so incredibly isolating and really cause you to question your identity in a way that, like, people who haven't been in that situation don't, like, I can't even explain it in a way that someone who's never been in that situation would really understand. We also see him coming to terms with some childhood trauma, so there is trigger warning for sexual assault, and how that factors into where he finds himself now. He's also dealing with the death of his father, and the relationship was really strange. He comes from a very poor, very rural small southern town, and his relationship with his father was really brutal in a lot of ways, and so he is struggling with, how he feels about his father's death, what he should feel about it, if anything at all. And so all of those things kind of bubble up to the surface over the course of the weekend. He also is like has this, I guess, relationship with a friend who he thought was straight. So he's kind of dealing with someone who really isn't sure about their own sexuality. Um, and so, yeah, it's like beautifully written. It's beautifully brutal in some ways, and it was one of the best books that I read this summer. So that is my choice for number 2. The third question is, fall is back to school season. Share a nonfiction book that taught you something new. So I really enjoy nonfiction, and I go through spurts where I read a lot of nonfiction and then I won't read any for a while and then kind of dive right back into it. And my pick for this question is Catch and Kill by Ronan Farrow. If you have not heard of this, so this is the story of how Ronan Farrow really broke the bigger story of Harvey Weinstein. I can never remember how to pronounce it. Harvey Weinstein, I believe it is. How he really broke that case wide open, and the bigger story of the Me Too movement. So first of all, the pacing of this book really reads a lot like a fictional kind of espionage kind of story, and there are elements of espionage in this work as well, which is really kind of shocking to read about. And I think the one thing that this book taught me is I think a lot of us consider news and journalism as an extension of that as this really honest pursuit, right? Because journalism and a free press is one of the things that is really important to democracy, and that's not hyperbole. I honestly believe that. And free press is really important to just society as a whole, and I think the further we get into this administration, we're really seeing kind of the effects of what a not free press means to us in the public. And so I think what I really learned through this book, and what's really important, is how much of what we see in the news and what is reported to us is really affected in politics through politics, I guess, instead of the other way around. So there were very political connections. Wealth really shaped how much of this story came out and when it came out. And behind the scenes, the way that Ronan was sort of working against a news organization to break the story. The news organization, was dirty in its own way, and that at the time he was working for NBC, and NBC was really squelching its own story of sexual harassment, sexual assault, sexual impropriety, reaching sort of the highest echelons of their own news organization, with Matt Lauer being ousted sort of at the same time that he was working to break the story, and how much of an open secret that was at NBC. And really how much of an open secret the extremely horrific things that Harvey Weinstein was allowed to perpetuate on women specifically. I mean, he definitely assaulted women and harassed women, but I think that environment of hostility and had an undercurrent of rage that affected everyone who worked for him. And that was something that I didn't really know. And it's really disappointing, I think, in a way, to realize that these ideals that you kind of hold up in terms of journalism being like this noble profession, and the people reporting the news wanting to break the stories for the greater good, because you don't know what you don't know, right? And sort of having the blinders ripped off of your eyes and kind of seeing it for what it was disappointing. It was heartbreaking. There were like moments in this book where I cried. There were moments in this book where my jaw was literally on the floor in terms of the things that the powerful and wealthy use to discredit people and to keep people from speaking the truth. Like it was like some next level like spy shit that I really had no idea that was going on, so if you haven't read that, I highly recommend it. It is one of the most amazing pieces of nonfiction and journalism that I've read in a really, really long time. So the next question is, in order to keep warm, it's good to spend some time with people we love. Name a fictional family, household, or friend group that you would like to be a part of. So this is kind of difficult for me, was kind of difficult for me, but I decided on, it's a series of books. The author is Louise Penny. They are mysteries, so they center around Inspector Gamache, and they take place in Canada. He lives in a very small village called Three Pines, and throughout the course of this series, we are introduced to this very sort of quaint, picturesque, small Canadian village, so small that it's actually not on a map. We are introduced to his family. So he has a wife that he has been married to for 30 years, I think. They have a daughter, and we are introduced to some of the people that he works with. He is an inspector with the police in Quebec, I believe it is, and so we are introduced to like various characters that he interacts with, who also work with him on the police force. And the thing that I really enjoy about these books is, first of all, it's really good to see, like, in a mystery, in terms of that has a police character who is a member of the police force, who is the main character of a book, have a really solid, functional marriage, because we don't see that. And the inspector himself is very well drawn out and doesn't have a lot of, I want to say, like in mysteries and thrillers, these things are given to characters as kind of quirks, but they really are like deep personality flaws in a lot of ways, and we don't really see him have any of those quirks. He's in a solid marriage. He has a solid relationship with his daughter. He loves his wife and daughter. He loves his friends. And we see the makeup of the village. There is this older poet, Ruth, who is really an award-winning poet. I think she's in her 80s, and she has the phallus crassest mouth. And she has a pet duck. And Clara is an artist, and she really only came into art and received fame as an art, you know, in her 40s. There's a gay couple who owns the bed and breakfast and a cafe. There is a black character, Myra, who owns a bookstore, and she, you know, left her practice and sort of retired and moved to this small town to open a bookstore. And it really is, I enjoy that these are adults, right? And that they're, you know, in their 30s and 40s and 50s and older, and we don't often see that a great deal in popular works of fiction. And they behave like adults behave, and I really appreciate that. And they're quirky, but not so out there that you can't imagine them as real people. And their quirks aren't added in order to like prove how solid he is, if you get what I'm saying. Like, these are fully realized people in their own right, and none of who they are in terms of personality serves as a vehicle to tell his story, and I really appreciate those. I believe there are like 20 something books in the series. The latest, I think the last 3 I haven't read. I probably will read sometime over the winter, just because they're the type of stories that you just want to curl up with on like a cold afternoon and kind of read in one sitting. So if you're into mysteries, I highly, highly recommend those. So the next question is, the colorful leaves, it's not really a question, the colorful leaves are piling up on the ground. Show us some fall colored spines. Okay, so number 6, fall is the perfect time for telling stories by the fire. Share a book wherein someone is telling a story. So for this question, I picked The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I really enjoyed this book. It's the only thing that I've ever read by this author. So in it, we meet Monique Grant, who is hired by Evelyn Hugo to sort of write a book about her life. So Evelyn Hugo is very much, she was very much a movie star that is like Rita Hayworth-esque, or very Elizabeth Taylor-esque in terms of her off-screen life was almost more interesting than the movie roles that she chose. And the way we hear about her life is through the 7 men that she chose to marry, which is where you get the title from, The 7 Husbands. And so we get to go kind of in depth and behind the scenes of these marriages and the men in these marriages, and find out more about the life of Evelyn Hugo, why she chose these specific partners, and what was really happening in her life at that moment, and some of the, I guess, behind the scenes things that may or may not go on in Hollywood. So I really enjoyed that book. If you haven't read it, you should pick it up. So the next question is, the nights are getting darker. Share a dark, creepy read. So I actually, I think, included this book in my very first and only so far reading vlog, but it is When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole. I think she did a really great job at creating this very creepy atmosphere once again, where you're with the main character and sort of trying to figure out along with her whether these creepy things are actually happening or is it a figment of her imagination. So I will link that vlog, but also just a quick bit about the story. So it takes place in a rapidly gentrifying Brooklyn neighborhood. And the main character is kind of seeing some things that are happening in her neighborhood that aren't really adding up. And so she is trying to get to the bottom of it. So it is very much like Rear Window meets, I think, Get Out in some ways, that I really enjoyed it. It was really creepy. I don't do like horror. I don't enjoy being scared, and I enjoyed this book. It was more, yeah, it wasn't like a kind of like a scare me kind of novel. It just was creepy. And I would say the last maybe 100 pages or so of the book, the pacing really speeds up and the creep factor gets upped a little bit. So yeah, it's not, I think in my vlog I call it like a dystopian thriller, because it doesn't seem like it's frightening enough to be horror, but it's not a standard thriller either. And if you're looking for that, I can see where you would be disappointed. So, yeah. And then question number 8 is, the days are getting colder. Name a short, heartwarming read that could warm up someone's cold and rainy day. For this question, I chose Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by GAIL Honeyman. And I remember reading this last year, and at the time that I picked it up, I had been in a reading slump and hadn't read anything for several months. And I think I just picked this up on like a word of mouth kind of thing, and I was completely charmed by this book. It is, I think, just over 300 pages, so it's relatively short. But the main character is an awkward and very anxious woman, Eleanor, and she really goes through her life sort of not really, like, being sort of okay with functioning at like this baseline depression. And like, as a person who lives with depression and has been diagnosed with depression like most of my adult life, I really sort of appreciate that, sort of going through, like, things aren't awful, but you don't really realize that they can be better either. I'm not really sure if I'm making sense. And so she goes through, you know, her life with this baseline, like, she does not hate her life, but she certainly doesn't want more or even really expect the world to give her more. And so by sort of this weird circumstance, she interacts with a coworker, Raymond, sort of outside of work, in which they like together they save the life of a total stranger, and that really propels her forward in her life, and sort of you know, establishing relationships both with Raymond and this sort of older man that they kind of rescue, which was, it was really sweet. And so, yeah, it's just one of like those heartwarming, like feel good books, and I really, really enjoyed it. So, fall returns every year. Name an old favorite you'd like to return to soon. So, I am not really a rereader, and I think most of that has stemmed from the fact that a lot of the books I read are mysteries or thrillers, and so it's, to me, I don't, those books aren't really interesting as rereads, because you already have, you know, what the mystery is, right? So I had to think hard about this one, and I would say, really, and it's kind of cliche, but one of the only books that I reread, and I do so about once a year, is The Great Gatsby, and it's just, I'm not here to argue whether or not it's this perfect piece of like classic fiction or great American novel, but it is a novel that I really love, and I think part of that has to do with when I first read it. So I read it initially when I was a sophomore in high school, and you know, that time of your life is very important, and you're really kind of figuring out some fundamental things like about yourself and about the kind of life that you want to have. And so it's just one of those books that I enjoy reading over and over again. And every time I read it, something hits me differently about it. And there's, you know, something that I don't enjoy that maybe I did enjoy, or maybe something I'm now enjoying that I didn't enjoy, you know, originally. And it's been one of those things that has been interesting to see sort of my progression of thoughts on the theme of the book, or the themes of the book, and you know, who the hero is and who the real villain of the story is, and how that has evolved over, you know, time and you know, age. I think age gives you different perspectives when you're reading things that you enjoyed reading when you were young. So yeah, that's, you know, it's cliche, but it's something that I like. So what are you gonna do? The 10th question is, fall is the perfect time for cozy reading nights. Share your cozy reading accessories. So I read, I tend to like to read on smaller things. So this is like a love seat. This is in my office. We also have another love seat in our living room, which I have also filmed in front of that setting, and I just like it because it's smaller and it like forces me to curl up. And then I usually have a blanket or a sweater, a beverage, sometimes hot, sometimes cold. Right now, even though it's a little chilly, I am drinking a cold beverage. So this is sort of my beverage of choice right now, which is Jameson and ginger ale. And yeah, you know, some good ambient lighting, maybe a candle to kind of set the atmosphere, and that's really what we do, and by we I mean me. That's what I do for cozy reading nights. And so that brings us to the last question, which isn't really a question. It is tag some people. I don't really have any like booktube friends, so to speak. So if you have a booktube channel and you've stumbled across my video, consider yourself tagged, or tag yourself in the comments and give me your own answers to these questions. So that is it. That's my video for today. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Like I said, let me know in the comments below. If you want to answer any of the questions, I'm going to list them all in the down box, and you can give me some of your recommendations for some of the questions. That would be cool. If you want to see more videos from me, then be sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the notification bell if you want to be made aware of my very consistently inconsistent upload schedule. And that does it for today. I will see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching.